I will call Clive and Sorius on stage for a Q&A. And just to explain that if you want to ask questions, you should use your phone with slido.com and use the code that is there. If you have any connection problem, use the Wi-Fi, because usually it's better. And I will receive them here. Thank you so much for this film. It's an important film and very inspiring. And I'd like to start by asking, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I was really impressed by the cultural richness of your country, and how the film is also about how culture funds identity and supports people's identity and people's capacity to be good citizens. And that is a message that the film passes across that I very much find a very urgent message. So thank you for that. I wanted to start by asking you how you two got together to make the film. Because we saw you and Charlie Hafner, but we don't know about the story of the beginnings of the film. How was that?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, Clive and I have been working together for years for Insight. Mm-hmm. And then we've both been discussing the possibilities of just telling, good news stories. And then through our CEO of Insight at the time, I got to meet Katie Baxdale, who wanted, this was during the Ebola period, and Katie wanted to go and help. She wanted to do something, and she asked me what can be done. And at the time, I thought, rather than giving money, because there's no doubt that Ebola money was being squandered in Sierra Leone, so I thought the best thing was to see if she can help us make a film like this. It was all about, we need good news story, we need positive story, we need just a story that will somehow help win the heart of tourists and business investors to come to the country. So, and she thought, yes, it is important. It's something that I think I can help you guys. And that's how it started. And like I said, Clive and I had been working together for years before this project.
Mm-hmm. And how was it, Clive, for you to tell a story that somehow is different from what you were used to be doing before, and to go through this journey and filming this process of building a theater play, but also this personal process of Sorius with Charlie, but not just with Charlie, of confronting with the challenges of his own society. How was that for you?
I mean, it took a lot longer than the films I'm used to making. I mean, I think one thing that I feel was common actually between Sorius and my experience was a certain liberation from what are otherwise sort of constraints that are put on you by commissioning editors or broadcasters who, obviously, they want a specific type of film. Even the story itself is something which they want. Whereas in this case, there was a sort of freedom. Sorius was free and liberated from those kinds of shackles. He wanted to tell the story that he wanted to tell. And I also was free to tell the story in a way that I wanted to, without thinking, is this appropriate for, like Channel 4 dispatches or whatever. So that sense of freedom, I think, is something which Sorius and I both sort of relished. And it's kind of gave it more of a creative possibilities, I guess. But ultimately, I mean, it was an amazing experience because, I mean, I've worked with Sorius, as he said, for many years, and they're normally quite intense, quite short shoots. But the chance to sort of really dive into his country, and I've I know so much about his country through him. To dive into it with him and with Charlie, they're just such incredible companions to learn and to experience a place like Sierra Leone. And every day the conversation was so interesting, and there's so much the country has to offer. And just as an outsider to learn and to sort of feel privileged in a way, just to go on this extended kind of journey with them. I mean, it really felt, if anything, like a total privilege. And I mean, you know, it was just an amazing ride. And I guess hopefully the film captures some of that.
Absolutely. And there is a moment in the film that kind of echoes the intentions of the film when Charlie talks about the typical coverage in Western media about Africa and about Sierra Leone, and how that feeds channels, you know, and raises the bar on audiences and rates, etc. So the economy around misery and around the depiction of misery in Western media, which it is a quite sharp and harsh critique. And of course the film is trying to be a counterbalance to that, and that is really obvious. But did you feel challenged by Charlie in that moment? Did you feel that challenged by what Charlie was bringing about, not about your work, because you know, we know how your work has been, but in terms of the economy and the culture that is behind, you know, the big media outlets and the big media representation of Africa? How did you feel, both of you, differently probably, about this way that Charlie critiqued the traditional way of depicting African subjects and Sierra Leone?
I mean, he you know, I'll quickly tell you what prompted me to start challenging this form of storytelling. I think it was in 2005, we went to Zambia to work on Living with AIDS, one of my Living with series. And we entered the office of the district director or something like that. It was three of my white colleagues and myself, and we got in, and he offered my three colleagues chairs to sit, and then he asked me if I can wait outside. And Claudio, who was my director, said, "No, he's our presenter." And then he said, let's get a chair, and then sat down. What that did for me, it prompted the years of stereotyping of the white man is the power. And you know, we have got to a state that we've bought into that, we Africans, that we don't even have respect for ourselves. And that was when I came back, start thinking, you know, I remember straight away I attended the One World Media Conference, and I started preaching the fact that we need to change the way we think about ourselves, but it's got to be done through the stories that we tell, because the stories that the Western broadcasters have been telling about us are, as Charlie said, they care more about headlines, about what will sell, about what bleeds. You know, so at the end of the day, we Africans have bought into that. And I understand where Charlie was coming from, because it was something that we examined many times in the film. Because I did ask myself, I did question myself, especially when we were sitting on that slave step, whether I have held on too much to the Western way of life, and what's the balance. So I understand where Charlie was coming from, and I have done a lot of soul searching about, you know, the way we have been depicted and what we have bought into. And I think that is the damage, and that's the challenge that we have. And that's the reason why I think stories like these are important to be told the way they have been told from the African perspective. Don't know what you want to add.
Actually, one thing I did want to say, and which we didn't say during the introductions, and which I'd like to say now, is that obviously we wish Charlie could be here, and he was supposed to be here. We hope he's going to be here for our London premiere in a week's time, and it's just visa and COVID and stuff like that. But I don't know, it was, on one level for me, I was kind of fascinated by the contrast between Soris and Charlie, and the fact that I knew deep down that Soris was so desperate to do, you know, positive stories about Africa, nonetheless had made a career out of, you know, doing news and current affairs, which is always quite harsh and, you know, sort of like unpicking the negative sides of things. Whereas Charlie really has made a career out of doing the opposite. Although in the early days he was more kind of like antagonistic to governments, but in a weird way I was sort of seeing it just from these like kind of like fascinating character study sort of perspectives. And the more, even though Charlie inherently is kind of saying it to me as well, because I'm part of that, I was just like, God, this is so interesting. Are these guys like this sort of, you know, just chalk and cheese? Like, it's amazing. But actually, in the end, I kind of feel like it's not just about coverage of Africa. I mean, the entire culture of news and current affairs, I guess, is one which does essentially focus on uprooting and exposing bad things that are happening in the world. And you know, whether or not there needs to be an entire shake-up of that culture, because I mean, there are obviously growing kind of sort of growing movement towards, you know, why don't we have more coverage of good things that are happening in the world? Does it sell? I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I know people who are in commissioning positions and also in Africa, and they're saying, you commission like a really good news story, no one watches it. And that's the weird thing. So I don't know whether it's just like with market economics or whatever, but I did feel really happy to make a film like this with Soris, because I knew how important it was to him, and just actually because I love Africa. I mean, you know, I've gone travel quite a bit, and there's so much to sort of celebrate, and there's so much interesting stuff, and I think Sierra Leone is such an amazing place, and to have the opportunity just to cast it in an entirely fresh light was really fun and cool. And I, you know, watched the film, and I'm like, yeah, it looks amazing. You know, it just looks like a cool place. I'd want to go there. Yeah.
You know, if I could just add, what is sad is that you have a lot of production companies and freelance journalists. You know, you have people who are keen to try and just sell the same stories of, you know, the same stories about Africa to commissioning editors. And they're struggling, but that's all they keep pushing. And I just wonder when some of us will start saying, okay, let's look for this type of stories about Africa rather than just the same old same.
Maybe we just need to see more of those films, and then we will know that that is possible, you know, because sometimes people, we look for also for what we already know that exists, you know, and sometimes people need to have more of this. It's a question of habits too, right? We have a lot of questions from the audience, and I need to start asking them. So I will start by a question that I was actually thinking about a little bit about the process. How has the recent COVID-19 pandemic affected the revival of arts and theater in Sierra Leone? And I wanted to ask, nothing in your process was affected by the pandemic except the editing, of course. But the shooting, you managed to shoot everything you wanted.
Yeah.
So how did the pandemic affect the revival of arts and theater in Sierra Leone?
Quite recently, the new mayor of the city was trying hard to see if they can build a new single theater, because for now, the only theater performing center that they use is the British Council now and again, and it has to be specific performances. It's not every group that gets access there. There are still no theatre complexes in the country. So what people have been doing is just street theatre. But because of COVID, even Charlie, things have slowed down with his Freetown players. But fortunately, luckily, COVID is not too much of a problem in Sierra Leone. But what you have people doing is small sketches that they put on WhatsApp, just small short plays. But we still haven't gone openly, publicly to even do the street performances. So they've been cautious at the moment, but there is hope that there's going to be one big theatre complex that is going to open in the country soon.
That's great. When Charlie was failing to deliver the play, was there a fear it might never happen? What was your plan for the documentary, if so?
The good thing that we did about this project is that from the beginning we said, Charlie and we had a conversation, and I think Clive was also, I know you were abroad, but we had a call with our exec director, and I remember saying to Ron, if this is going to work, I have to talk to Charlie for both of us to be very open. We've got to be honest, we've got to be frank, we can't hold anything back. So my take was that if the play hadn't happened, it's different from what we're used to, but I think that's what made it what it is. I think we would have just been honest and say, that's the theme, that's what it is. It would have been, yes, it's true, I was scared at some stage, I don't need to say that. Personally, I used to go home, I used to go back to the hotel room, and I'll call Clive, I'll have a go at Clive, because I felt at some stage Clive was being very, very diplomatic, but he was in a very difficult position because I was having a go at him. Charlie was having to go at the poor guy. But it got a stage where I was beginning to resign to the fact that this is not going to happen. And that would have been the theme.
It would have been a disaster. If the play hadn't have happened, it would have been a total disaster. Because in the end, the message would have been so depressing. And it was interesting for me because in the end, the whole enterprise felt very much like a trio. We were like, there were three of us in this thing, Soris, Charlie, and myself, and just the three of us through the whole course of the whole thing, just together. And I'm, of course, filming both of them, but nonetheless, the camera's off and we're kind of like chatting together. And it was kind of hard to sort of remain like the documentarian, because ultimately I'm watching this thing kind of falling apart and I'm thinking like, I've got to help, something's like, this can't happen. And in the end, I sort of was trying to kind of manage in a way, or try to help them reconcile. And I think Charlie saw me as very much being a kind of like, I'm on Soris's side, like, of course I am, I've known him for so many years, and like, you don't understand me. And that's why I was diplomatic, by the way, because I couldn't afford to lose the trust that Charlie had in me to represent him honestly and truthfully, and for him to not feel like he was going to be kind of cast down in some way. So it was pretty awkward because Soris is like, "Come on, Clive, put your foot down. This guy's not delivering. You got to tell him." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I'll do it in my own way."
Someone needed to be diplomatic.
Yeah, but it was tricky at times, but we got there in the end.
But you do show that very honestly in the film. There's a moment where we actually see you kind of desperate already, and we're all as spectators nervous about the idea that the play may never happen, which is kind of interesting.
Charlie, actually, when he watched the film for the first time ever about 2 months ago, he lost himself in the story to the extent that he was like, "Is it going to happen? Is the play going to happen?" He forgot he was in it. Like, yeah. It's pretty cool.
Was there a special moment in the film for both of you that you remember?
There were quite a few, but I think my real takeaway was two key ones. One was the moment we were sitting on the slave steps. I realized that we don't know anything about our identity, who we are, because people don't even know, Sierra Leoneans don't know that slave step exists. People they don't care, they don't know. But just sitting there, I realized that we were like three generations. Charlie's son, Charlie, who is older than me, and I am in the middle, that we have not been talking. We have not been passing on our history, our stories to each other. It was that moment that I thought, we have, apart from this film and the play, I think we should think about a project to go around the country and just let people understand, because that was the first time that it hit me, that we have so much rich heritage, culture, and tradition here that we need to teach people. That was the first. That was the first one. But the second bit was that in Sierra Leone, the political divide, the tension. I mean, we were people that were really united, but now politics is dividing us big time. There's tribal tension going on. Of course, you have to pick sides with the politicians, with the parties. But these, in the film, for the very first time, I saw that we managed to get the key parties, the political parties, to embrace a project, to support each other, to actually agree, because the president knew that we were going to the opposition leaders and he blessed us. It doesn't normally happen in Sierra Leone, because when you talk to one party, that's it, you don't go to the other. But we manage, and that's when it hit me that we can, if we find the right method, and if we change the way we think, we can actually pull these guys together and this country can work. And that's why I was so desperate for the play to work, so that we can, in the end, get them in the same room and say, look, we did this in a play, but we can do this for real. So for me, it was those two moments.
Yeah, I don't know, there are so many moments in a way, because I guess one thing that I sort of find, and even when I reflect on the film and even when I watch it, I kind of feel like there's such an abundance of stories. Like just the basic story itself of these two guys trying to make this incredible play is an interesting story, but Sorius and Charlie both have incredible stories as well, and they've both got so many fascinating stories within their life stories. And then Sierra Leone has an amazing story, and it's just, there's sort of so much to choose from in that sense, and that's kind of where my mind gets drawn. But when I think of like specific moments, somehow like the bit that I always enjoy watching the most is actually Sorius when he's kind of in that car with the tickets, trying to wait for the ticket guy to deliver the tickets, and he's sort of pulling his, well, not his hair, but like pulling something out, and like there's something about that moment encapsulating Sorius's sort of inattention, that kind of like tension between his somewhat westernized self and his Sierra Leonean self, and he inhabits in a way what is, I guess, the sort of primary theme of the film, which is about identity and conflicting identity. And in a way, the most memorable moment for me, actually, when I think about it, is a scene which speaks directly to that, but on a more macro level, which is at the end of the road trip, they've had that meeting with the chief, who says we should be proud of who we are. And then we end up in this bedroom hotel, and Charlie's there saying, we're lonely people, we're kind of caught between the West and Africa, and Sorius is talking about, we used to have our religion, we don't know who we are. To me, that moment was like, I remember just there was something about the atmosphere in the room. Like Charlie was incredibly really thoughtful, and both of them kind of got on this thing, and I was like, just in that moment, I was like, this feels like the heart of the film. And the fact that Sorius inhabited, actually, at a personal level, the kind of tensions that they were describing, felt like a very interesting sort of reflection, or something that I thought this is a really interesting part of the film. So that bedroom scene was pretty like, that was like, oh, this is really interesting.
Thank you. We only have time for one more question, and we have a lot of questions here. So some of them you have kind of addressed. There is one that has not been addressed. The government minders said Charlie and Sorius might not need minders in the future. Is the Sierra Leone government on board with the play's purpose?
Oh, yes. Well, before that, I've done a few themes that have ruffled feathers. There was one key theme, I think it was timber. It was in which it was an investigative one that we went undercover and caught the vice president involved in timber smuggling, and it was close to elections, so they were thinking they're going to remove him. They went to court, and this was one theme that I was threatened. They actually threatened to kill me. I was chased, the kind of stuff. So as a result, the government didn't want to. In fact, we had a challenge to get them to buy into this theme. So we had to. I think it was when we went and and talked to the president that people started, because the Minister of Information wasn't going to give us accreditation. So
They were terrified that Sorius was actually here to do another number on them. So they were like, yeah, whatever, play, yeah, good cover.
So they just didn't believe. But in the end, after he has spent a few days traveling with us and actually had some of the stuff that was going on, that's when he relaxed, and that's when he made that statement. But the president was very, very relaxed about it from the word go. So he genuinely believed what we were going to do, because when we wanted to do the timber theme, I actually went to him and said, Mr. President, you campaigned on corruption, you haven't delivered, and I want to do a theme on corruption. And he said, oh, what do you want to do? I said, I won't tell you, but I don't want them to see me with gadgets and they arrest me. I just want you to know. So he said, hey, go ahead. So he knows whatever I say is what I will end up doing. So this time we told him we want to do this type of theme, and he was cool, but until they realized that we've spoken to him and the minder has gone, there was still tension around town. But eventually, I think they all agreed, but they've not seen the film yet.
They're all going to be very surprised when they see the film, though, because none of them had any idea that Sorius and Charlie were in conflict. And when it comes to those meetings, public-facing meetings, and trying to get support, it's like, oh, it's amazing. Yeah, the script's like, when they watch it, they'll be like, that's not what you told us was happening.
But that's part of the message I'm hoping for this film, that we can fall out as a people, but as a nation, we should be able to pull together. We should be able to go back and see what is wrong and be able to correct it. That's what we have done as a friend, and that's why I keep saying it should be like a mirror, that the nation should look and see. Friends can fall out, but in the best interest of the nation, we should be able to pull together.
Of course. We need to stop, but there is a question that can have a very quick answer. What are the chances of the play being produced on the international theatre circuits?
Well, you go. I mean, you know better.
The play. Our hope has always been that the play will be seen countrywide and then internationally. But I think Charlie has been, I wish Charlie was here to answer that, because we still need a lot of work to even take it round the country in the future, let alone internationally. It's saying that it's not impossible, because in 1983, when I was an actor, we came to Lift Festival and we performed for like 2 weeks. So we do have what it takes. But I think because theater hasn't theater was not that active in Sierra Leone for over 10, 15 years. So to actually get good, fine, disciplined actors will take some time, because most of the people in this play were not professional actors. Charlie managed to find a few people here and there. So to actually get some proper play done that will cross borders, he will need to find professional actors. But that's not impossible, because maybe, I mean, he said to me after seeing the film in Freetown, he said, now I'll do another film. Now I know, I'll do another play. I know what to do. You know, so it's not impossible.
Well, let's hope for that. I'm so sorry. I had 4 more questions here, but I am sure that if you keep your masks not too close, maybe outside, Sorius and Clive will be happy to answer other questions from their audience. And I hope you enjoyed being here together. And thank you for coming. Thank you, Sorius and Clive.
Thank you.
Thank you.